Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Destiny Leaders YouTube channel. Destiny Leaders is an organization that helps pastors and second-tier church leaders, as well as organizational leaders, reach their full potential, not only in their leadership, but in Christ. Today, we want to present to you a conversation that takes place between Dr. Phil Brassfield, our Executive Director, and Dee Sokolosky. Dee is the president of the First Bank of Owasso. This conversation is split into two parts. The first part is a discussion of the small business administration loans that are made available because of the coronavirus. The second part of the conversation are questions that some of our organizational and pastoral leaders ask of Dee. We wanted to make this available to you because we know that this content is exactly what you need right now. Please know that today and every day, our Destiny Leaders staff is praying for you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our conference call. It's going to be a very important call, and we have the right person lined up to help us today. You're going to be glad you called. Probably as all of you, I think we all have been excited and interested and a bit cautious about the new CARES Act that was approved into law. Actually, it wasn't signed into law on Friday, but it was approved by Congress this last Friday and then promptly signed by the president. And in it is a provision that we are not used to seeing as it relates to religious organizations and nonprofits from the federal government, and that is to be included in a small business administration loan/grant option. And so I'm so delighted today that we're going to have this conversation, and my special guest today is no stranger to Destiny at all. His name is Dee Sokolosky. He is the president and CEO of First Bank of Owasso. Been in the banking business for many years, and his family. He's also an attorney, so we have a lawyer, a banker, all rolled into one. But more than that, he is a devoted follower of Jesus Christ, and has been a huge blessing to so many of you and so many of those who aren't on the call today. Just helping them with everything from their planning their finance and their budget at their church in terms of best business practices, but also help them with financing when they needed that. And has now, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think maybe over $20+ million has been loaned through First Bank of Owasso to our Destiny partners over these years. Never, ever, not a single time had a complaint. But everybody's experience with Dee and First Bank has been outstanding, and he is obviously an authority and an expert in this field, and he's going to join us today. Dee, thank you for joining us. We're so delighted to have you. Thanks for the time.
My pleasure. It's a great blessing to be with my friends at Destiny. I get to work with so many wonderful people, and it's a great honor to be with you and your team.
Well, thank you. And you've been such a blessing over the years, and the bank, and we love it because not only are you excellent at what you do, but you care about your customer. Not that other bankers and banks don't, but our experience is firsthand. And you care about the church, you care about the kingdom of God, you care about the people that you're working with that are in ministry. And we have a number of folks who've joined us and are still joining us. So let me just kind of do a little housekeeping thing here. We're going to allow something we don't often do, but we're going to allow open questions today. And so let me tell you how this works on your phone, because I'm looking at a computer screen and I see all of your numbers. A few of your names are there. Most of your numbers are not associated with a name. So what you do if you'd like to ask a question is just push 5 star on your touchpad, and that will essentially alert me that particular number has a question. And then we'll try our best to get to those in the order they come in. There's no guarantees with that, but Dee has graciously said that he would stay with us and answer any questions that you have, and we'll try to get everyone covered. Depends on how many we have. So we have quite a few churches and leaders involved. So if we don't get to your question, you certainly can drop an email to me, and then I will get with Dee, and we'll forward those questions, and we'll try to get you an answer. So, Dee, why don't you just take a second, if you would, and bring us up to speed on what's happening with this CARES Act and kind of your world on the banking side and how it's going to impact churches potentially.
Be happy to, Dr. Brassfield, and you used a word there several times, care, and I just want to be an encouragement to your pastor team and your ministers that this is a time where you can really be an encouragement to the business people in your church. These are challenging times for people who view their responsibility as being accountable to make sure people get paid and have payroll. And just a quick story. Last week, Pastor Tommy Brandon down at Calvary in Burleson reached out to me. Pastor Tommy, I've met at the gatherings. We've had some good conversations. He's not a client. His bank takes care of him real well. And he just reached out to me to say, I know you're probably getting hammered. They just want to be an encouragement. You were called to do this. And, when the bullets are flying and somebody who's not even a client reaches out to you, it's an incredible encouragement. And, I just appreciate John Ragsdale and Mark Briggs and a whole bunch of folks that have reached out. So you can do the same thing for all the business people in your church, and I just want to encourage you to do that. Okay, let's jump to the CARES Act. As Dr. Brassfield led in, this is the first time in history that a church has been able to participate in a government program, and I would be remiss if I didn't give some credit to U.S. Senator James Lankford from Oklahoma. As some of you may not know, he's an ordained minister and ran the Oklahoma statewide Southern Baptist camps for many years. Senator Lankford contacted me about 2 weeks ago when they first started working on this to figure out the easiest way and the fastest way to get through the SBA bureaucracy. And while we were chatting, I just pointed out to him that, the last emergency disaster loan program that came out about 3 weeks ago or a month ago or whatever it was, it included nonprofits, and we all got excited. And then down in the fine print, it specifically excluded churches. And I pointed out to Senator Lankford, if we could get that exclusion out of this next act, it would be an incredible blessing to probably 240 of my clients, and it happened. And I know legislations like making sausage, there's probably other people that deserve credit, and who knows what happened, but it's a great blessing for our churches. So here's the deal. It's a payroll act. The goal of the legislation is to encourage all employers to fully employ all of your employees. They're trying to, in the last 9 days, we've had 10 million people join the unemployment compensation ranks. This goal is all tied to payroll and encouraging you to keep everyone on your payroll. So what you do is, and I won't get into all the exceptions and definitions unless you guys have specific questions, but you're going to take your 2019 payroll, excluding some taxes and including some benefits, and then we come up with a monthly average for that for the year 2019, and the maximum loan amount can then be 2.5 times that number, 2.5 times your monthly payroll. So the qualification for the loan, the determination of the amount of the loan is purely payroll. There's some stuff out there about interest and rent and all this that has nothing to do with the application and how much you can qualify for. Now, you can get the loan, but our real focus needs to be on how we get it forgiven. And that's the back door to this, and that's the key. So the day you get the loan is going to start an 8-week measurement period. You must use the loan proceeds. In fact, you will certify in the application that you will use all these proceeds only for payroll, rent, utilities, and interest on any obligation that was incurred prior to February 15th. So if you have a loan, you can deduct the interest portion of that loan, count the interest portion of that loan, but not the principal portion. So if you use 100% of the proceeds for those purposes during that 8-week period, we've met hurdle number 1. Hurdle number 2 is you can't have cut any specific employee's salary by more than 25%, or that employee doesn't count. Then, assuming we pass those two hurdles, we now measure, and we're still slightly unclear on whether we're using FTE, which is full-time employees, or we're just using head count. I think the application has FTE, but there's been some confusion on that. But basically, we're going to take whatever your employee base is for that 8-week period, and we're going to compare that to one of two other periods, and it's your choice. So we can either use for the comparison period the 2 months of January and February of 2020, or we can relate back and compare the period from February 15 to June 30 of 2019. Whichever one of those would be the most advantageous for us, and the one that would be the most advantageous is the one where we had the fewest employees. Because now the test is going to be, did we have the same number of employees in the 8 weeks after we got the loan as we had during this comparison period? If the answer to that is yes, then it's 100% forgiven. If the answer to that is no, there's a scaling down. So let's say you had 80% of the employees during this 8-week period, as we did during the comparison period, 80% of your loan would be forgiven. So, and you have to pay back the rest over some period of time, which is still in flux. The first thing that came out was you had 10 years to pay it back. I've now seen somebody saying it's going to be 18 months. But we're still waiting on the SBA regulations. That's why this is very fluid. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. So for those of you that have daycares or ministries, separate 501c3s that run daycares, this is an important thing for you to think about. And I know Pastor Willis down in Shreveport's on the call. This specifically applies to you. If you want to go ahead and pay these people that you've laid off, whether you require them to come back to work or not, is great. That money will count. But if you're going to be in a situation where either your state has forced daycares to close, or you have 25% of the employees in the daycare as you had back in January and February or before, you're not going to get very much of this debt forgiven. It is strictly a payroll head count test. So I would encourage people, what I'm encouraging clients to do is figure out what your payroll is going to be for the next 8 weeks and apply for that number and maybe a little cushion, whatever might be your utilities on that. But there's no use applying for 2.5 times monthly payroll if you're going to end up having it not forgiven. I just think you don't want to end up with more debt, and there's some wisdom to kind of planning that on the front end. But having kind of outlined that, Dr. Brassfield, I know there's a lot of details, and do 1099s count? Does housing allowance count? We can get into any of that people want me to dig a little deeper in the weeds.
Right. I think we probably should do that because so many churches do pay through certain people through 1099s, through contract labor. So could you just talk about that for a second?
The housing allowance is the easy one. I think first of all, there's nothing in the Act or in any of the guidance we've seen to date that answers either of these questions. My opinion, and I think the opinion of most people, is that the housing allowance is a payroll obligation of the church, and the minister is simply designating which portion of his payroll is housing for tax purposes and which is not. So I'm telling our clients, go ahead and include the housing allowance as payroll. The 1099 is a different story. That is not mentioned in the Act. I'm hoping that today or tomorrow the SBA comes out with specific guidelines on this. Otherwise, we're guessing. The things I know we can exclude that don't count from a 1099 would be any vendor that you 1099. like your landscaping person or, somebody did a bunch of repairs that you had to do a 1099, that doesn't count. Any missionary that you're 1099ing that doesn't live in the United States, that doesn't count. All employees have to be in the United States to count. The most common question that comes up is some people that pay musicians and they 1099 the musicians. I'm guessing that might be included, but don't have a real good answer for you on that one. And luckily, it's probably the smallest piece of the deal and may not matter immensely in the big picture. But and the reason
well,
it's
and my thought on is you have to think about the back end in terms of what you're going to have to account for after the money is there. So if it's somebody that played for you for Christmas and they're on your books and you paid them a $300 stipend to include that, well, if they're not going to be here during the 8 weeks after you receive the loan, then that's going to be a problem. So am I right about that? I mean, that's my understanding. Yes. Is when you're asking for it on the front end, you have to be able to defend it on the back end or you wind up paying the money back.
That's exactly right, and that's a temptation that some of my clients are not going to resist. There's going to be the mentality that we want all the money we can get. We'll worry about paying it back later, and I just wouldn't go there. There's no use taking out additional debt. If we're in a position where we can't operate, I think it would be better to be front up with your bank and get a loan or a line of credit or whatever, or some interest deferral or whatever we need, as opposed to, I'm going to take this big giant loan and all of a sudden it's gone and I've spent it and now I'm going to have to pay it back. I totally agree with you.
Well, that's great information, and it is. I've read through the act that as it relates to the nonprofits and religious entities, and it's amazing how much vague language is in it. Like, for example, it mentions wages, salaries, or other similar compensation. So I'm assuming that's where the 1099, the housing, and all those things would fall in, is going to be in that similar compensation category.
You're correct, and the reason I'm just a little slow, and I think it's because I have too much lawyer in me, there's a big difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And there are actually separate provisions in the Act where independent contractors, sole proprietors, individual owners, they can apply on their own. So, for example, the easy example is a home builder that has a jillion subcontractors that do different work on the house. They're all 1099. Well, clearly none of those count. They're not employees of the builder. I mean, you would have a massive payroll. So I'm just a little slow to jump on all the 1099s are included bandwagon. And if they're not going to be there, if we're not going to have the musicians, there's no use getting the money. And I'd just leave it out if it were me.
Right. I think having thought that through, we pay several of our employees on 1099s, but they are weekly, have been with us multiple years. They are regular. They are part of our staff, and so I would encourage those on the call to kind of think in those terms, that is this person someone we hired one time for one thing, or is this someone who is part of our team that just happens to be compensated on a 1099? And I think we pretty much all, know the difference between those two.
That would be my thought process. I'm an old farm guy, and we had an expression, pigs get fed and hogs get slaughtered. Do the right thing and get the right money, and don't try to be greedy and get stuff that's going to cause you a problem. Right.
And anytime at this, I have a few questions prepared, Dee, but if I go too far down the road, we need to backtrack. We'll certainly feel free to stop and say, let's go backwards. But I think a lot of the folks who have been hearing bits and pieces, it's good to hear an overview, and I think that's the knowledge levels are pretty good on that. Where can people? Let's talk about the application process. Okay, I'm a church, in Albuquerque, and the only relationship I have with the banker is is the building was paid off 5 years before I became pastor, so really just a checking, savings, an operational account. Where do I begin to look to apply, and what do you recommend in that regard?
That's an excellent question, Dr. Brassfield, and that's going to be one of the challenges for our churches that don't have a strong relationship with the banker. And just, speaking openly and candidly, every bank that's doing these loans is going to be absolutely slammed. And it's just human nature that we're going to take care of our clients first. In fact, we're not taking a single application from a non-client. I'm going to take care of my people first. And I think every banker is going to think that way. So if you don't, and by the way, this application has to go through a bank. Most credit unions are not doing it, and you can't apply directly with the SBA. So in the situation you outlined where you don't have a lending relationship, you don't know a lender, I would begin trying to make one. I would call the bank and explain I've been a depositor for X years, been a good customer of your bank, put me in touch with a lender where I can begin talking about the program. And we view someone who has an account with us, they are obviously a client. So if you were in that situation with me, you would be right in there with Destiny Ministries that has a loan. You're a client. The fact that you've already paid us off or don't need a loan is irrelevant. But we're going to have a lot of people out there that have their accounts at credit unions or have their accounts at banks that aren't going to deal with this. And again, just to be frank with you, this is not a windfall for banks. I have a peer bank in California that I exchange ideas with that's bigger than us. They're not going to do this at all. And any bank that's not geared up to have done SBA loans, a lot of those smaller organizations are saying, we're not going to mess with it. It would take us forever to learn how to operate the SBA portal. We don't understand this 800 pages of regs. There's not really any money in it for us. Just forget it. So I would start the process now. Luckily, you have clear until June 30 to apply. So you have an opportunity to develop that relationship with the local bank, but that's where you want to start.
Fantastic. And so you're just recommending that in your immediate market area, reach out to banks and start with the one you bank with. And if they don't do it, perhaps then they can give you a referral. And because you're a customer, ask for a referral and maybe a name. In my experience, and I've had a fair amount of experience, in the banking world from a customer standpoint, sometimes a relationship, even just through a recommendation or referral, can really help the process. And so what I would suggest to you, if you're on the call and you fit that category, call your bank where you do checking and savings. If they don't do it or can't, then ask them to refer you to a friend that can help you or that does, and ask if you can use their name as a referral. That would be my advice. Do you agree with that, Dee, as a plan of action?
That is brilliant advice.
Good. All right. So that's that. Now, we have a question that's come in. Why don't we, because it may be relevant to where we are right now, I'm going to go ahead and take a question, and I don't have a name, but I have the last four of your phone number, 2550. I'm going to unmute you, and why don't you go ahead and ask your question? Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Tommy Galloway.
Hey, Brother Tommy, I ought to recognize that number.
I'm telling you, have I got bumped?
No, I'm looking at quite a few right this minute. So go ahead and ask your question, Tommy.
Okay, just a couple real quickly. Most of our employees except me are 1099, and so I think we have to cross that bridge. That's been, it's still vague. But what documentation do we have? So we go to the bank tomorrow. What documentation do we need to take with us?
Okay. You're probably not going to get to go to your bank because all the lobbies are closed, and they are going to be slammed with phone calls and emails. They probably aren't going to want to see you. I would email or call my banker and find out what documentation they're going to require. There's some general parameters on what documentation is required. The application's the same. your bank can give you the website of the application that everybody's going to use. It's a 2-page application. It's real easy. But I can tell you what we're asking for, and this is what I think everybody's going to ask for, is first the 941 quarterly remittals that show the payroll and the taxes paid. The 1099s, that's where you're going to get into a challenge. And I assume if you use ADP, some people may take ADP records. You may just have to document via checks. We don't have very many clients that do that. But it would be up to your individual bank to decide. The SBA has kind of pawned it off on us that we have to get documentation that we can certify the numbers on the application are accurate. And we're going to be a little slow to certify something as accurate unless we have good documentation of it. On the health insurance premiums, most people are printing off from their QuickBooks, here's the check number and the amount, and it all went to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm going to take that. Other banks may say, no, I want a statement from Blue Cross Blue Shield on how much your premiums were. It's just going to be up to your local bank.
Okay. Okay. And just go ahead.
I'm sorry, Pastor Tommy, if I could just, we're doing this right now, so I can just kind of tell you what we're doing, and we have a number of 1099 employees. So and Dee, you can maybe get me with the right number. I think it's the 1065 form is our CPA's form that gives a registry roll of all the people and the 1099s that we issued. And so we're going to, instead of submitting copies of each 1099, and Dee's the one that's going to get it, so Dee, stop me if I'm wrong, but instead of submitting every single individual 1099, we're going to submit our certified report from our CPA, and I think it's a 1065 that says, okay, this is the number of 1099s that were issued during that time frame. Here's who they were for, and here's the total amount. And is that accurate, Dee? Or suitable?
That would be no. That is perfect. In fact, since we don't deal with 1099s, I had never heard of a 1065. But some banks are actually requiring a CPA to certify all this stuff. So if you're getting a CPA to certify and they produce that document, that would be excellent. I know that would be sufficient for me.
Okay.
Does that help, Pastor Tommy?
Yes, that does. And so I guess the last question, maybe this is not the right. Our church is financed by an individual. Someone gave us an interest-free loan, and so we're no longer with a bank. We have a banking relationship for years and years and years. But did I understand correctly that because we're in Destiny that you would take us as a client, or because we don't already have a relationship that we would have to wait till later?
Yeah, you would have to wait till later. And part of the reason of not only just human nature of preferring existing clients, we already have the articles, bylaws, tax identification number, know who the president is. We already have all that information on existing clients. So it really streamlines it for us. And It kind of bogs up the system to start asking for all that other stuff we don't have.
Gotcha. Okay. All righty. Well, thank you so much.
Pastor Tommy, before we move on to another question, that's a good point. Dee just passed over it and mentioned it. You know, you probably would want to have prepared your articles of incorporation, your bylaws. You know, think in terms of the application you complete and the kit that you put together, because it's more than just the application, because the application asks for supporting documents. And I've never seen the government involved that they didn't want your articles of incorporation, your bylaws, and your determination letter from the IRS demonstrating that you are indeed a 501c3.
Good advice.
Okay, with that in mind, if we're in Destiny and do not have our church is under Destiny, and are we covered under Destiny's 501c3?
Yes, you would be, but we would probably need to print you a copy of our determination letter and and the group number. And so we can certainly prepare that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because in all the busyness of what we've been doing the last day or two, we haven't done that. But we can provide that for you. I don't know that you'll need it, but it would be there if you did.
Right. Okay. Oh, that sounds wonderful, and bless all of you. God bless.
Thank you. Okay, Dee, are we ready for another question?
Yeah, while we're on that,
Go ahead.
Dr. Brassfield, he mentioned something I'm not familiar with. The affiliation with Destiny would probably cover you from a 501c3 standpoint, but I think he's still going to have an EIN and have an actual corporation or something to be a borrower. Because if he tries to use Destiny's EIN, that's going to be picked up over here, and you can't have two applications.
Right.
No, we have that. We have that
Okay.
personally. You know, we have all of that.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, even DS being a part of Destiny, we require a separate EIN and that they submit their own articles of incorporation from the state they're in for their nonprofit status before they're eligible to be covered in our group exemption.
Well, I should have assumed you would do it perfectly because everything else you've done is perfect. So I shouldn't have even jumped in there.
Well, honestly, we need guys like you around us to help us do it right. So I'm going to take another question. Are you ready? I'm coming to phone number, last four digits, 9752. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Good morning. This is Dick Linville with Legacy Owensboro.
Good morning, Brother Dick. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate this phone call. Quick question back on what's classified as full-time folks. Are you suggesting at this point we hold off until that's more defined? I mean, from the business world that I come out of, full-time is 40 hours. We have 7 employees, but really 2 only apply that are salaries are based on 40 hours. Would you go ahead and include the other ones just as a padding, or would you just not include those other 5 people in the salary count for 2019?
Good question, Dick. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well.
Yeah, get that theater finished. Remember,
we got our building permit yesterday, so. Hello?
D?
Did we lose D?
I'd hate to have to answer that question, although I could probably try.
Okay.
Looks like D's line dropped. He may have been on. Just bear with us a second. We'll get D to call back in. Dick, if I can try to answer that now, let me just let him know we lost you. We included all of ours, Dick, in that if they are regular employees and not, again, just someone we hired to do something one time type thing. Like we have a computer guy that comes in and he's our IT guy. You know, he may work every other month for 2 or 3 hours. We didn't include him. But if they are part of our staff and in that with us on a weekly basis, then we included our part-time employees. I kind of have a plan for that. I mean, and we'll get into this. Once we get Dee back on, we'll get into that again, probably a little bit. But on the back end, so we're going to separate this money. We anticipate some sort of not audit, but some sort of reasonable defense. In other words, when it comes time to ask for this to be forgiven, we expect to have to prove it. We want to make sure that is so clean and so unquestionable that it's a smooth process to get this forgiven. So we're actually setting up with Destiny a side account, an account that all this money will go into. And that money then will be apportioned out during payroll cycles where there is a clear deposit where the money came from, the SBA. Then there's a clear. Okay, he's back. Let me just find him here. Okay, Dee's back with us.
Very good.
So
what happened?
Yeah, it's okay. I was just trying to field part of the question. I'll finish and you can take over. He's asking about part-time versus full-time employees, and I had told him that we included our part-time employees, but I was kind of had a little plan for that on the back end. So, and Dee, you can tell me if this is wise or not. Correct it. Feel free to completely correct it. What we're going to do is put this money from the SBA into a separate holding account where it's really clean. We can show where that check was deposited. It went there. Then in payroll cycles, Amy's going to debit out payroll from that account through these 8 weeks. And then if for some reason there's a part of our application that was disallowed and we were overpaid, then the money will be there to reimburse it without us having to pull it out of our general operations account. It's just a management technique. Maybe I'm a little overcautious, but so on some of those questionable things, we're including them. If there's some point in the process we found out we shouldn't have, then the money will be there to reimburse at the end of the process, no problem. What's your thoughts on that, Dee?
I wish I had 10,000 clients like you. That's exactly the way I would do it. And to answer Dick's question, it's clearly appropriate to include all part-time employees in the payroll count. It's all payroll no matter where it comes from. The differentiation between part-time and full-time may come on the back end, because I don't know when we compare the 8-week employment to the prior period, whether we're going to do head count or FTE. I don't know the answer to that, but we'll deal with that when it comes. So what Dr. Brassfield said is exactly right. Include that payroll amount in your total payroll calculation.
Okay, that's great. Second real quick one, life insurance premiums, that doesn't look like that's covered.
You are the first person that's asked that, Dick. Let me see, I've got the act right here in front of me. I know it's retirement benefits, dental, and medical. Okay, here we go. Group health care benefits, including insurance premiums. But it does a repayment retirement benefit. Dick, I do not see life insurance included in the list of stuff, so I would probably leave it off.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, again, you can ask a question by simply pushing 5 star on your phone, on your touchpad. Push the number 5 and then star, and that will identify you as having a question. And a couple of great starts to our Q&A time there. And so are we ready for another question? We have one coming. Rob Griffin, our friend nearby, near you there, Dee, has got a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Rob, you are on the air. Ask your question. I feel like a radio DJ.
Hey, Dee, how are you?
If I was any better, I'd be pastoring a church in Glenpool.
Yes, sir. I'm going to try to get this to you tomorrow, but I have a question real quick. On the application and on the letter you sent me from the bank, you stated the monthly average for 2019. But I mean, I know exactly how I'm going to go for this. I have 2 of us are full time, and I'm not going to try to work in any of my 1099 musicians and those. I'm just not going to do that. So, I mean, I'm going straight off the number of actually what we're getting paid. Giroux does our payroll, so I got all of the paperwork from them yesterday, so I know my exact numbers. I mean, when I put it on that line, I mean, am I looking at 2019, or do I just look at really what I know is 2 months worth of salary that's going to happen either on a 4-week month or a 5-week month?
Great question. You are required to put the 2019 monthly average, and then the 2.5 times that is the maximum loan amount. You are not required to ask for the maximum. So when it gets to the point where you actually want to put how much your, this application has it on there, but I think you can designate that you want less money. And that's where you would use whatever your payroll is going to be.
Right, because it would definitely be less.
Correct.
I'm thinking. All righty. Well, that's what I'll do then. Thank Thank you.
Oh, and Rob, if you want to use the 2019 payroll for just the two people you're talking about, I think that would be fine as well.
Okay, yeah, and I should include my housing from 2019 on that monthly average.
Yes, if you're going to continue paying that in the 8-week period, I would.
Okay, sounds great, Dee. I appreciate it, man.
Yes, good talking to you, brother.
Good talking to you.
If I could just jump in, and maybe it helped me when I understood this. This is designed to keep people, as many people from the religious nonprofit sector, off the unemployment rolls as possible. So when you think about that, why is the government doing this? Well, the government also authorized an additional $600 a week to be added to the average unemployment compensation of people on the employment. So there are people, I think the average I read the other day was like $348 is what the average unemployment insurance compensation check is on a weekly basis. They're going to add $600 to that. These folks are going to be bringing home $900+ a week. So I guess, and Dee could speak to this, but I guess in the minds of a lot of these politicians, it's like, wow, if we can help the churches and nonprofits keep their staff, keep them off the unemployment rolls, we're actually going to be probably significantly ahead financially.
Well, it's not just the churches. Yes, it's not just the churches, it's everybody. And I would like to think they were thinking about you when they drafted this, but they weren't. I mean, the language, nothing tracks churches. But yes, it's a employment act. They want people to keep their people on staff, whether they're working at a church or a car wash. And the challenge of the 600 is, what's a livable wage in Owasso, Oklahoma is completely different than what's a livable wage in New York City. So they came up with a number, which means some people are going to be, quote, overpaid, and there will be some people that will make less than what they were making. So, yeah.
Right. So I would just say, Rob, just as I'm thinking about your question, if you're going to be paying those musicians, now, in your case, you may not be, because that's something we have to consider. Well, we're not using them on Sunday because we can't meet. Well, the only way you would want to go ahead, in my opinion, and apply for that 1099 money is if you're going to pay them whether you're meeting or not. If you're not going to pay them if you're not meeting, if that's the kind of relationship that you have with that particular employee, then you're going to have a problem potentially on the back end of that process, because you're going to have drawn the money on the front and then not have the employment to justify it on the back end. So, you're wise in not doing that.
All righty.
Okay. So we have another question coming. We're coming to number 6853 in our little bingo deal here. And so you're the winner. You have a question for Dee.
You don't see
go
my
ahead.
girlfriend? I'll ask.
Okay. 6853, you're on. Do you have a question?
Yes. Hey, Dr. Brassfield, Brent Norton. Dee, this is Brent Norton.
Hey, Brent.
Hey, thank y'all. Hey, I'm the squeaky wheel. Always. I'll make this fast. What I got a question about, Dee, what do you want for us to approve our payroll amount from the daycare and the church? I know you have all my stuff already.
No, I don't have anything from you that we would need, because we don't collect 941 information. So you would need your 941 remittances to document what your payroll was. And then for any portion, Pastor Brent, you have the same issue that Pastor Willis has, is that you need to think through your daycare. And so there's no advantage to asking for money to pay daycare people if you're not going to pay them. If yours is still open and thriving, great, I would include it.
No, we're still open.
Good. Good. Okay.
We have to have a certain amount of people, and we've lost some kids, but we have our same staff. But my next question, in daycare business, it's a fluid staff. They come and go, but you have to have a certain amount of staff members per child, and they lowered the ratios on us to do this.
Right.
So we have to have, we're having to maintain We've only cut one person's hours. That's all. But my question on that, we do all our own payroll, through a payroll service and everything. What document do you need from them?
Well, you file something probably quarterly called a 941 that you file with the IRS that sends that information in. So yes, some people's fourth quarter one summarizes the whole year, and if the whole year is on the fourth quarter one, that's all we'll need. Otherwise, you'd need the 4 quarters. And there is a provision that we didn't get to, and I'm glad you brought this up. There's a statement in the application that's kind of weird. It says, due to likely high subscription, it is anticipated that not more than 25% of the forgiven amount may be for non-payroll costs. Now, that's not in the Act. There's a provision that if you cut an employee's salary more than 25%, then that employee's salary doesn't count in your period, or that employee doesn't count in the period for purposes of how much is forgiven. But assuming you keep everybody 75 or over, we still have the challenge that we need the payroll during the 8 weeks after the loan to be more than 75% of the total cost. So those of you that have a big mortgage payment, that interest in there will count and your utilities will count, and you'll probably make it. But I'm just a little worried about how that 8 weeks is going to fall. We don't want it to cover 6 weeks pay period, and I haven't drawn a picture on a calendar yet to figure out if any specific 8 weeks always includes 8 weeks of pay periods. Hopefully it does, but that would be the thing just to make sure.
Yeah, ours are covered pretty close. We've already went through the first. Okay, now, say, can you do, like some of the people, can you do new hires and count them in your time?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, because some of the people are gone. That was on last year's, like, and if I'm rambling, you say, talk to me later, email me, and I'm fine with that. Say, but I am also the official daycare director, and I don't take a salary, but we had a daycare director, and she moved on and went to work at Shell Road. They're members of our church. But so if we hire a director or a director's salary during that time, and some of the church side we laid off, but we may bring them back now, you know.
Yes, that's the goal. Okay. That's the goal of the Act, is to have you hire people. Yeah.
Okay. Then I'm pretty much covered. Because this is really, these are real payroll numbers. So you need that last 4. I'll send you what we got, and then if I need something else, I'll get it to you.
Well, did you say you use an accountant or a payroll service?
We have a payroll service. We do everything in-house. But the market works
many of the payroll services are already geared up to give you exactly what we need.
We have that. We have what you need.
Okay. And remember, if you're including any stuff like group health plans or any of that, you need documentation of that. If yours is all payroll, okay, then the 941s ought to cover you, plus any documentation of housing allowance that's not in the 941.
Okay, I have a piece of paper with that.
Okay.
Now, let me ask you this. Housing allowance for me is more of a number than a separate check. Does that matter?
What do you mean it's more of a number?
It's a number I include in my salary, but I don't get a separate check for that.
Well, do you get any money for it?
Yes.
So it's included in one check?
It's included in one check, yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, and I have already have that document signed off on my board and stuff, but I don't get a separate check on it.
Okay, if all of your compensation is in the 941, then you're already covered.
Okay, it is.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate what you're doing. You've really been a blessing to us through the years.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Dr. Brassfield, for doing this also.
You bet, Brent. You guys stay healthy down there. We're praying for you. Well, we have another question. Dee, are you still good for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Stephen Boykin has a question. He's pastoring in over in Kentucky at his house, and so Stephen, go ahead. You're live.
Hey, Dr. Brassfield.
Hey, brother. How are you doing, man? I got you.
Great. Thank you all so much for this call. I just had a few quick questions on the back end. I don't want to take up a lot of time. One thing, is there going to be an early repayment penalty? Say, I love the idea of the separate account, and if we're going to do the loan process, we'll do the exact same thing for the financial bookkeeping and stewardship. But is there going to be a repayment penalty if, say, we got $25,000, we use 15 that we know that will be forgiven, we're going to repay back the 10, just using it as a grant? Is there a penalty for that?
There's no penalty, but there's no interest being charged in the first 6 months, so there's no incentive for you to pay it back early, and it might create accounting issues for the bank. So if I were you, I would probably just wait till the final forgiveness report and see exactly what the number is, but you're wise to have those proceeds available. But to my knowledge, there's no penalty.
That being said, also, as far as interest rates, have they talked about what the interest rates will look like if something didn't qualify?
And this is where it gets confusing. First of all, there's no interest or fees of any kind for you during the first 6 months. So once we get to June 30, at the end of your 8 weeks, we apply for forgiveness. In a perfect world, this will all be over by Halloween, and we can jump up and down and go home. If you don't pay it all back and it has to be carried, the unforgiven portion, the first thing that came out was it could be carried over 10 years at 4% interest. I have heard through Dr. Brassfield that another bank thinks it's going to be a different number, and that's what we're waiting on from the SBA, is just actual confirmation on how long they're willing to carry it. I was a little surprised at the 10 years, frankly, because the SBA is guaranteeing this money, and they're not going to want to be messing with this, I don't think, forever. But whatever the rate is will be low. I think it's 4%, but no interest on you for the first 6 months.
And so there's no fees to get started, no application fees, no closing costs, none of that.
Correct. There's no collateral, there's no credit underwriting, there's no mortgage, there's no guarantee, nothing but this application form and the required documentation.
And then just one last question. Do you foresee any strings attached of any other sort of tax liabilities down the road, or anything that could be attached to this in the future? There's nothing in the fine print that you have seen.
No, in fact, it's very clear in the Act that there, even for-profit businesses, there are no tax consequences on any of the forgiven debt, no taxes at all. The only little certification that might give you a little heartburn is, in all SBA documents, you have to certify that you will comply with the civil rights laws, and it names the 3 sections, and they all relate to race, sex, religion, national origin, marital status, and gender. None of them relate to sexual orientation. But when you apply, you're certifying that in your employment practices, you will not discriminate on those other bases. And again, that's just binding on you until you pay the loan off.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's so kind.
Pastor Stephen, if I could just weigh in from a sense of, they want you to use this money for payroll. I mean, obviously, if you don't use it for payroll, then it's not going to be forgiven. But don't feel like, well, we're just going to be really tight and using it. I mean, they want you to cover your payroll. That's the reason they're saying, what was it last year? Look at it. multiply that times 12 or whatever you use calculus to come up with the number that's what your monthly payroll cost is, and multiply that times 2.5. So they're not expecting you. I don't see that there's any benefit. So, well, we've got 28,000, but we only used, 14. Well, then that means somebody wasn't working, somebody wasn't employed, that they would rather have employed. So, just bear that in mind, that it's not, it's really not designed for you to save it. It's designed for you to use it to keep people employed. Am I right about that, Dee?
Yes, and the good news is we're using it to pay employees, which means the money we would have been used to pay employees, we can do something else with. So we all know that money's fungible, and we're going to keep it in a separate account, but it's still free money and frees up other resources.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. And you did say, I'm sorry, you did say about you can use it on utilities, you can use it on your mortgage or your rent.
Yes, it's payroll, rent, utilities, and the interest portion of your mortgage, just not the principal pay downs.
All right.
And your bank can easily tell you exactly how much of your payment during those 2 months went to interest.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. And one last caveat to that, Dee mentioned it a moment ago, 25% of those proceeds are all you can use for non-labor purposes, if I'm understanding that right, Dee. In other words, if you can use it, but you really shouldn't exceed that 25% threshold.
Right, and the thing that worries me just a tad is if we're applying for 2.5 months, that's almost 11 weeks. Well, we're only going to have payroll for 8 weeks. Well, already 8/11 is less than 75%. So I'm just a little concerned about people applying for slightly too much money and coming under the 75%. So I might be just a tad conservative, unless you already know that your payroll is going to be high, that your payroll would be more than it was in January and February.
Absolutely. Great information, great advice. Thank you, Pastor Stephen, for that question, and we're praying for you guys there in Kentucky. All right, we have another question. This is coming from 7921. You're live and ready to ask. Go ahead, 7921.
This is Michael Kelly, and thank you, Dr. Brassfield, for doing this.
Absolutely, Brother Michael.
The question is, I'm hearing now you can use this money to pay towards mortgage interest, rent, utilities, but you should not use those figures in gathering your amount to receive of a loan. Correct.
Dr. Brassfield, I couldn't hear all that. Could you repeat that, please?
His question was that he understands that they can use some of the proceeds up to 25% of the proceeds to pay for mortgage interest and utilities and all, but he should not use that on the front end in terms of its calculus for how much money to get.
Correct. The calculus is only payroll, and when you get this application, you'll see that there's one line on it. You put in average payroll, that's the only line on the whole page.
Does that answer your question, Michael? In other words, you can't use it to figure it on the front end, but they do allow for you to use it on the back end.
Correct.
No, that's perfect. I just want to verify and make it perfect.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Well, anyone else have any questions? We don't currently have any other question boxes up. Some great questions though, Dee, and you've done such a great job answering them. Is there anything else, Dee, that you think we should deal with or to bring up that would be of relevance and interest?
I just have one thing that's kind of off the wall. This is the first time any faith-based group has been able to apply for government money. And when you open the door for any faith-based group, we have to remember that there's going to be a bunch of people applying whose faith or purpose or cause we don't agree with. And so I'm already anticipating the right-wing tweets and blogs. Well, the Satanists and the atheists and the Wiccans and the cults all got tax money, and, I'm opposed to that, and I want to call my senator. Well, the way they solve that problem is they just cut you out next time. So we need to remember that we live in a world where everybody has different religions and faiths and practices, and we're not going to agree with them, but we need to give our senators and representatives that voted for this political cover and not participate in complaints about who got the money. We're just happy to get it. That'd be my approach, because we may never be in this again. It may never come up, but I don't want my senator saying I took a whole bunch of heat from all these red state Republicans in Oklahoma about, the local Wiccan tribe got some money. Let's just don't go. Let's take the high road. Be supportive of our elected officials. Thank them for the opportunity. What a great idea you guys came up with, and just really be an encouragement to people. This is the time, and now I'm preaching and I need to quit. But in any crisis, the body of Christ gets to shine through. And just looking for ways that we can help people, and whether it's individually, we mow the neighbor's yard that's 70 years old and doesn't be doing that, or we go pick up groceries, or whatever we can do. During this crisis, I want the world to see the body of Christ as a group of people to be emulated and not complainers.
Amen. Amen, Dee. You can preach on. We have a campaign right now, and if you'd like to participate in it, it's just graphics. You can use it ever how you want to at your church. But if you go to the COVID page on our website, on the Destiny Leaders website, there's a campaign down there, and one of the campaigns is Shine On. Matthew chapter 5, the scripture says, Jesus said it, that a city that's set on a hill cannot be hidden. And this is an incredible time. We have to always remember for us to shine on. And I think you're absolutely right, Dee, and appreciate you mentioning that, because sometimes it's so easy for us to get pulled into a political war or tribal conflicts, and some things we legitimately disagree on. But this is an opportunity where we need to leave that alone and just be grateful that God's used our government to provide some relief. I know there are a lot of churches who their giving is significantly down right now because of their online services and what have you, and the Lord has provided some relief for that from Pharaoh, or forever how you want to consider it, from the government, and I think we just are grateful for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Dee, before we wrap up today, why don't we talk a little bit? I know you don't know everything about this yet, but I know even from my standpoint, it's a question, and that's about the requesting forgiveness. Like, let's just use Destiny case in point. You're our banker. So what will we need to do on that 8-week plus 1 day or whatever that we're going to be submitting a request for forgiveness? What are you going to need from us?
Again, we're guessing because there's absolutely no procedures, guidelines, or documents ready, but I'm assuming there'll be a very simple one-page forgiveness form where the authority at the organization certifies that these monies were spent this way, just like on the application, and we provide the documentation. So you're going to submit 941s for that period of time to cover payroll. Any other allowed expenses, you're going to submit that. We're going to look at it, make sure we've got the documentation to support the forgiveness request. We're going to enter that on the SBA portal, like we have to upload all this loan stuff. I'm guessing then there'll be some ping or authorization, and they tell us X amount is forgiven, and the Treasury is going to wire us the money. Unfortunately, it says they have 90 days to do that. As a banker, I would like it to be less than 90, but they will wire us that amount of money, and we will pay that off on the loan and let you know the amount that's still owing, which hopefully, if we've all acted prudently and we don't have a lot of employees leave us that we didn't plan on, that number will be zero, or it'll be a small, 10, 15% kind of number. But none of those documents are out yet, Dr. Brassfield, but I'm guessing SBA will have them here at some point in time.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. We do have another question that's come in. I'm going now to number 6853. And so you're unmuted and ready to go. Go ahead and ask your question, 6853.
Okay. Hey, Dee, Dr. Brassfield, Brent again, got a question. We have extra questions. Would you like us just to email you this?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Pastor?
If we have other questions, my mind is getting full right now of just, and would you like it to be emailed to you? For people to communicate
that's the best way.
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to return 100 phone calls, but I'm communicating. No. I'm here every day. Yeah, I'll answer your questions by email. You bet.
Okay, we'll do that, and I thank you for what you're doing. I just want to kind of get that out there. Okay, we get our application in. When can we expect the money?
Here's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing it's going to take our staff maybe, depending on how they come in, 3 to 4 full working days with 6 of us working on it to get that stuff uploaded. I'm assuming that the SBA authorization will be within 24 hours because there's no underwriting or anything. Then we have to prepare the loan documents, and they have to be on the SBA's forms, which they have not produced yet. And as soon as we get those forms, we will then email those to you, and it should just be a 2-page note. There's not a bunch of security agreements and all the stuff we normally have to have you sign. You will scan that, sign it, send it back to us. I believe we are told that we can fund based on a scan, but we have to have the original. So kind of the way I deal with you now is just, scan it, sign it, scan it back to me so I know I've got it, and then drop the original in the mail. I'm going to guess in a perfect world, this is a 8 or 9 day kind of process. I'm thinking it might be, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but I don't see any reason it should extend into May. I'm optimistic we'll get this knocked out in a couple of weeks. And, everything out here in this world is saying, you're going to get it the next day. You clarified that. One more question, I'll let you go. All right, I talked to you about our loan. Y'all have a dealing process. Do we need, never mind. I just answered my own question. I got my question answered. Okay. I just thought about it. Thank you very much. Okay. You're great. Yes. You're great. Bye-bye, Dr. Brassfield. We love y'all.
Okay, Brent. Have a blessed day. Dee, we have another question that's come in and actually didn't come in on our portal here. I'm not sure why it didn't show up, but it's from Donna Holland. And dear friends in the Dallas area and have been missions. She's asking, can a bonus be paid to use the 2.5 times? I'm assuming that if you're short, like let's say you were short meeting your payroll by $2,000, could that be paid to a staff member or an executive so as not to have to either pay that money back or to finance it? You understand the question, Dee? In other words, can a bonus be paid during the 8 weeks to level that to get you up to what you borrowed?
That's an excellent question, and I'm not surprised that it came from Pastor Donna or Pastor Ralph. They run an absolutely efficient organization. There's nothing in the act that says you can't change compensation. There would obviously be an incentive to raise it. If I had to just give you my personal guess, I'm going to guess that would be fine. But I'm also going to bet, we're not supposed to bet, I'm going to guess that these SBA regulations that are going to be coming out might cover that. But as long as the head count matches and the salaries are as much, I'm going to bet you might be able to get away with that. That's another thing we should have mentioned, Dr. Brassfield. The SBA is still issuing guidelines today and tomorrow. So everything I've said, or at least part of what I said, may not be true. And, I'm going to email all of our existing clients with anything that changes. And, you might make your organization aware of people that aren't, on my mail list. But there's a lot of stuff we don't know, but I'm going to bet Pastor Donna's question will work.
So just for clarity, let's say that we're kind of auditing ourselves as we move forward, and we borrowed we've got a number of $40,000 that we in the 2.5 calculus that we borrowed, and we're coming up on the 6th week mark, and we've used 32,000. So we have 8,000 in play. We're not going to use that last week. You're thinking that we could, among our staff, either issue bonuses or in some way use that money, providing it was for the same head count and the same amount of money?
I'm pretty sure it would work if it was an extra head count, because the goal is to encourage additional employment. It might be one of those pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered deal. You know, if it's the last 1,000 out of 40,000 and it looks like everybody got a $2 an hour raise, maybe. If it's a big number like you used, 8 out of 40, they may question that 941 is why was the pay increase substantially. So I'm going to hope we get guidance on that, and I have a feeling that, 8 weeks from now I'll have a lot better answer than I do today.
It may be that what we could do, and depending on need, if it's all clarified where there's not a lot of questions, but maybe somewhere toward the end of that 8 weeks, maybe we do another quick call and just let folks answer, ask questions and in terms of their reporting. That may, we'll see what your time's like and what the need is. But anyway, that might be an option too, particularly on these issues that there's some fuzzy, lack of clarity on things from the SBA.
Yes, I'm available anytime. That would be a great idea. I'm hoping we have good information, and by then we'll probably have the forms and can go over anything on the forgiveness forms that isn't crystal clear.
Well, listen, it's been a really interesting call. Dee, anything else? I don't see any other questions. If you have, thank you, Donna. She just texted me directly. And so she's asking another question here. I don't know why their deal's not showing. We have an excellent relationship with our local bank. Should we use them or Dee? Dee carries our mortgage. So, Dee, I'll let you weigh in on that. Would you prefer them to deal with you or deal with a local bank they have a good relationship with as well?
I tell you, it's one of those things that if they have a good relationship with the local bank and they can get right in, that would be fine. This is not one of those somebody's making a bunch of money and somebody isn't, so that'd be fine. Either one. Okay, and since it's across the street, it may be easier. If they've got something, you can get it to them quicker than you could get it to me or something. So that'd be fine. Well,
very, very good. Well, if you one last call, anyone, 5-star. 5-star is your call, and we'll just begin to wrap up here, and we'll wait if there's any other questions. Dee, I really appreciate your time today. I know you've got so much on your plate, and you're so generous with your time. And if you don't have, if you're on this call and you don't have a relationship with a local bank, and let me strongly encourage you to consider First Bank of Owasso, an outstanding investment program. You can actually put your savings there with them and know that they're loaning that savings out to help other churches and help church plants and church building projects. And it's a great way to get your money working in the kingdom where it's also insured and it's a safe investment. I have found and understood over these years, since Dee and I have been working together, and it's been many years now, there's nothing like the comfort of knowing I can pick up the phone and call and get good, sound advice with no agenda other than the kingdom of God, His purpose, and what's best for our business interests. And thank you for that, Dee. We appreciate it, and I just couldn't recommend you more to the folks on the call if they don't already have a relationship with you.
Well, you're very kind to say that, and I absolutely love working with you and your folks. It's a blessing, and I wish all my folks were as knowledgeable, cooperative, and efficient as you folks are. I did think of one quick thing, Dr. Brassfield. Some of us aren't real familiar on what taxes are federal and what are state. As part of this calculating your payroll, you may not include any federal taxes. So the employer portion of Social Security, the employer portion of Medicare, those cannot be included. Your unemployment tax is a state tax, and you can include that in your payroll for purposes of determining your loan amount. That's all I had.
Very good, and that clarifies. And if you don't mind, we have two more questions that have just come in, and
sure.
If you have time to take those.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm coming to 2027. You're open. Let's see, you're unmuted now and ready to go. Ask your question. 2027.
Yes, Robert Meyer, Paris, Texas. A short information on how the $10,000 is affected by the loan.
Are you talking about the $10,000 grant program you heard about 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
That is what they call the emergency disaster loans, and churches are not allowed to apply for that.
Oh, okay.
So this is what Dr. Brassfield and I have been talking about, is the only program available for churches.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
That's a good question, though, brother, because I have had that asked, and I didn't know that, as a matter of fact. I didn't realize that. And so thank you for bringing that question up. And it is in the Act. So if you're not careful, you'll think, okay, well, I'm eligible for this loan plus this $10,000 grant. And I think businesses are actually. For-profit small businesses are, I think. Isn't that right, Dee, perhaps?
Yeah, it gets complicated. You cannot apply for both. So if you didn't already have the $10,000 one, you can't get into this one, but I think you can roll that one into this. But there's not a double dip, I don't think.
Got it. Okay. All right. So that answers. Any other questions, brother?
No, thank you so much.
You bet. Okay, Dee, we have one more question that's popped in there. I'm coming to 7215. 7215. You're open to ask your question.
Hey, Dr. Phil, this is Dale Walker. Thank y'all so much for leading us through these amazing times. I did not hear earlier in the call, are missionaries that we contribute to missions giving on a monthly basis allowed to be included in this payroll number?
If it's given to a mission organization, the answer is clearly no. It has to be a direct payment to an employee, and the missionary, before it would even be possible, would have to reside in the United States. Payments to anybody residing outside the United States don't count. And so then we would be down back to the 1099 question, do 1099s to missionaries count? Some people think they do, some people think they don't. But the only argument would be a missionary in the United States. And we don't have guidance on that, and I can't honestly tell you yes or no.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Brother Dale. We love you. Thank you for the question. And we have one other that's come in back to Pastor Rob. He has another follow-up question. Go ahead, Pastor Rob.
Hey, Dee. I just wonder, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm going to try to bring this to you. How late's the drive-thru open today?
I started to say, you only get one question, sir, and you already asked it. So.
I'm just saying. I'm bringing through the drive-thru. I'm playing Battle Creek today, and so I'm close to you.
Can you imagine having this guy as your advisor for your D-Min thesis? I mean, good grief.
Oh, Lordy.
That's not a question I anticipate. How long are you open today?
Well, we're open till 6 o'clock every day through the drive-thru, but I don't want to see you over here today.
Yeah, well, you probably will through the drive-thru, but okay. So
you were being serious then. Hey, I tell you.
No, I really was.
Hey, Pastor, to save you the trip, here's what I would do. Nothing can happen till tomorrow anyway, even if I had your perfect application sitting here and it all happens to comply with whatever SBA comes out with today or tomorrow. Why don't you email me everything we sent you, the application, the checklist, and all your documentation, and let my analyst look at that and make sure we're good. And then if that's good and you want to bring it by, fine. But for now, I can take all that stuff by email.
Okay, that'd be great. Just your personal one?
Yeah, the bank one you always use, the DEES at First Bank.
Yes. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you, Dean.
You bet, brother.
Thanks, Pastor Rob. And let me just say to you, because we've been in the last day and a half working on our application, just bear in mind that the more incomplete it is when you submit it, the longer it's going to take. Make sure that you can provide everything on their check, whether it's First Bank of Owasso or any other bank. The more detailed and the more accurate your information on the front end, the quicker the process is going to be, because it will slow you down. If you don't include something they ask for and you don't know where it's at, well, then they set it aside, then contact you. It's a day or two, and then you have to get with your CPA or whatever and get it, and it's a day or two. Be aware of that on the front end. Do as much legwork as thoroughly and diligently as you can on the front end, and you'll be glad you did. Okay, Dee, I think that's it. No more questions have popped in. I'm sorry to have kept you over our hour, but thank you so much for your time today. And again, we appreciate you so much.
My pleasure. You're a blessing to so many people, and blessings to all the pastors out there.
All right, well, that'll conclude our call today. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope it's been a blessing to you. And just remember, here at Destiny, we're always committed to developing the leader in you and committed to the process of let's do something great together. And if you need us, we're here to serve. Just give us a call at any point, and we'll do everything in our power to help you. God bless you. Thank you, Dee.
Bye-bye. Take care.